Okay, I want to welcome everyone to our adult panel for the conference. We today are very fortunate to have two young men that will be joining us to share more about their experience of growing up on the autism spectrum and what they went through treatment and kind of what they're excited about today. And if they have any advice or things that they want to be sure that it would be helpful for the rest of us to know. So I know that in running my parent group, people are always really interested in talking to others on the spectrum. And so this is a tremendous opportunity for everybody. We thank you both for being here today. And just as a brief introduction, so I know that everyone's seen a video introduction of both of you, but we have here Nicholas. I think I'll be calling you Nick during the panel. You are 24 years old and currently a PhD student at UC Santa Barbara in California. And we also have Michael Tanzer, who—
Thanks for having me. Arigato gozaimasu.
Yes, Michael, who is 29 years old and wrote a fabulous book, MICHAELISM, my point of view on life with autism. So please make sure that you all go out and make a purchase to help him and learn more about his point of view. So Michael lives in Toronto. He's 29, lives in Toronto with his family. All right, so I'm actually going to start with you, Michael, and something from your book. I really enjoyed reading it. And I noticed in your book, you talked about addressing your sensory sensitivities. What could you share about the process of addressing your sensory sensitivities? And do you still work on sensitivities today?
Yes, I do. I work on my sensory issues. The hardest one for me today is the sound of elephants. Well, if I am at a movie theater or anywhere or hear the sound, I cover my ears and make a soft hum sound until it's over. I'm not exactly sure why this one has been hard to get over. I also still hate the smell of salads, although my parents do eat salads every day. Well, it has not been an easy and quick process. You know, I do remember that early on, I had a lot of sensory issues. This includes certain smells like food, loud noises, and clothing textures. I couldn't even go to restaurants, but now look at me. I can go anywhere. You know?
Incredible. Very good. Thank you so much. That's very helpful. So you just kind of kept trying and kept working at it, and now you can go anywhere. That's fantastic. Now, Nick, I'd like to ask you a question. How old were you when you found out about your diagnosis, and how did you find out about your diagnosis?
I found out when I was 15. And I guess previously there were always signs that I had autism through whether it's like ABA therapists coming over to the house or getting extra help in school and everything. But it didn't really strike me as anything peculiar or out of the ordinary. I just kind of accepted it at face value. And then finally that all came into context when my parents told me I had high functioning autism. Well, at least I was diagnosed with high functioning autism at age 3 and 5. And then later diagnosed with PDD NOS at age 7 or 8. I don't remember exactly, which I think signifies a progression as opposed to like any of the diagnoses just being flat out wrong.
Right. And how do you make the decision of when you want to share about your diagnosis with others? I'm not sure. Do you tell your friends or who do you talk to about it?
I might bring it up when it's necessary. Like, I guess like there's all sorts of news that comes in every day. It's especially easy to get a grip on the news. It's not like you have to wait at the morning every day to get the newspaper anymore. You can see it on social media, online, or whatever. And so every kind of social or cultural or political topic is brought up, and occasionally autism would become a thing. I also have a friend whose younger brother is autistic. So occasionally it's brought up. I don't necessarily like just, there's always an appropriate time to bring up certain things and there's always a time not to. It's very rare where I might actually bring it up in the sense where I try to say, oh, sorry, like I might have like done some awkward thing. It was because of like, and then provide context about autism. I'd only really do that if I was like really close with people and
right.
They would, otherwise it just makes it even more awkward.
Right. That makes perfect sense. All right, let's go to Michael here. Michael, can you
Oh,
tell me
yeah.
what's a typical day like for you?
Well, whenever I get up, I would take my pills first, shower, brushing teeth, not shave, not every day actually, but I do, and I get dressed. Usually I have errands to do. Well, I always do that because going out is my best thing of my life. And before COVID
Yeah.
takes place in on Tuesdays, I would volunteer at Northier General Hospital where my dad works there. I've been there since 2013. You know, it's really great.
Mhm.
Everyone loves me there. They think I relate to like my dad.
A
And
real
on
community
Thursdays,
for you.
it was true. Haunted this, yo. It's true. Oh yeah. I would go on the computer and work on my writing, let's say like broad blogs, or maybe I would consider maybe writing another book. You know, but who knows?
Right. Fantastic. Fantastic. All right. So let me go back to Nick here. We were you had mentioned before that you became very good at justifying some of your behaviors, and in my work counseling adults on the spectrum, I recognize that there are many individuals with autism spectrum disorder that can become locked into their own beliefs and very good at being resistant to changing their look at their perspective on things.
Oh yeah.
What advice can you give those trying to help individuals develop more flexibility of thought?
Yeah. And that's the downside of teaching kids like the traditional like logical structures of stuff, because then you twist it to your own ends and use it to justify like unpleasant or self-defeating behaviors, which is something I definitely did very frequently and still do to an extent now. I think it's important to not get thought up in like abstract concepts of logic, but try to put yourself into perspective of other people. Think about what are the tangible impacts of what you are doing. Even if it might seem like a pragmatic thing to do, even if you might, personally think it's not a very hypocritical thing to do, even then, I think you have to look at it first of all in terms of like like, do you really want to inflict, a certain kind of effect on someone that you care about, and secondly, like what in a kind of self-serving perspective, like if you do something that, even if it's like completely logically justifiable, ends up making people think worse of you, would you want to do it? Because you don't want other people to think worse of you, right? I think that's a big misconception of people about people with autism, actually, that they don't care what people think of them. They absolutely care what people think about them. It's just that they don't know how to necessarily act in a way that would make people see them in the best light sometimes.
Right. All right, let's go back to Michael. Michael, can you give me an example of something that was once hard for you, but now is easy?
Good question. Any routines being changed was the hardest. Well, almost everything was hard for me. I had to learn everything that my older brother and my peers could do. Janet, who was my longtime AP therapist, who still supports me today with many different things, she said that at the beginning, many of the Autism Partnership programs were learning to learn skills. The show, right? For example, speaking, riding a bike, learning math, and learning to write. The one thing that was never hard for me was reading. I was reading before I could ever speak. Well, I'm most proud of myself for getting better at public speaking. And the truth is, my dad says that the only constant thing in life is change. Nobody likes changes. Things do change, but you have to go with the flow.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's great
That's
advice.
true.
Going with the flow and learning to adjust to change.
It's true.
Very good. Very good. All right, I'm going to turn to Nick now. Now, one of the things that I think that parents would be very interested in knowing your perspective on is, of your experiences growing up, what do you consider the least beneficial and the most beneficial to your success?
In terms of in terms of like how it affected then, or
in terms of being like a young person on the spectrum growing up, What is something that you think was beneficial, and what was something that's maybe not that's helpful?
Okay. Yeah, I think I would divide both the beneficial and non-beneficial things into like two categories. Like one being like the actual direct implications of like exhibiting symptoms, like the proclivity to throw temper tantrums. In my case, to have like not really much sense of spatial awareness or social awareness. But then there's also the experiential category, which is not necessarily born from like the symptoms itself, but rather like the perspective or the kind of personality I developed because of people's reaction towards me exhibiting like the symptoms. And I think that in terms of the symptoms, obviously doing things that are considered to be like not normal, considered to be like out of base with most of society, were not very helpful for me. That's why I didn't have many friends. That's why I got bullied very often. And that's why sometimes I actually turned to bullying myself. I think that the sense of feeling powerless and the sense of feeling like I was at the bottom of the social ladder made me feel the need to like kind of convince myself to internalize the idea that maybe only I was a third or fourth most unpopular person in school, because then I'd bully like the people who I considered to be like beneath me. That's like a harsh way of putting it, but that was my perspective at that time.
Right, school hierarchy and all that.
Yeah, and people, everybody's very self-conscious, and people want to convince themselves that they're actually well liked, and some people like them. And I do think that one of the benefits though is that it allows me to, I think one of the peculiarities of autism is that you tend to focus very intensely on a few given interests, and that's certainly helped me as I've grown up, went into college and academia and everything, and obviously it's important to maintain a broad perspective, but I think that being able to really, really focus on particular things has definitely helped me decide very early on what I want to do in life. Not necessarily in a sense of career, but at least like what potential topics I want to focus on. In terms of experiences, I think definitely having autism and going through like all the experiences associated with autism makes me, I guess, try to check myself before I become too judgmental about other people. Maybe assume that they have something going on that's not really in their control. Especially if it's not like malicious behavior, especially if it's just behavior that might be not exactly normal by society's standards. I think at the same time, the experience of being, again, bullied and ostracized makes me tend to like be a bit of a know-it-all. I tend to like want a lot of validation from people. I want people to think that, I like know a lot about certain things. And
social affirmation through that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I need to realize that people value people not just for just randomly dropping knowledge about things, and also realize that that in terms of like how I'm thinking to myself, even in the non-social context, I need to remember that like a lot of maybe awkward or embarrassing things I might say or do, people don't really think about that. They have better things to worry about in their life, right? Yeah. And it's just something I need to still get over.
It's a work in progress, ongoing, right? Yeah. Thank you. Let me turn back to Michael here. So Michael, what do you think is the most important quality in teachers of children with ASD?
Well, that is easy. Contentatio. Teachers need to be patient, kind, and understanding, accept them for who they are, but still teach. Like staying calm, quiet voices, and listening, of course. But it is important for them to know that we are not doing things on purpose to be rude or mean or annoying. Well, I'm not rude or annoying, actually. But many times when it seems like we are being that way, it is because we are feeling nervous. Well, at least that was the case for me, right? But I want I want a lot of people to understand this. Understanding equals I don't know how to say the word, but well, allow me to say this. This is one of the reasons why I wrote this book in the first place. See this? It's true. It's becoming a success. I want to help and raise a better awareness of ASD, right? But it's true. but
All right,
really true.
I'm going to turn the question to Nick. Nick, do you have anything that you would think you'd like to add to that question?
Yeah. I think there are a few like obvious pointers that like, teachers and parents should be patient. They should be very vigilant. Like just because ABA session is over for the day doesn't mean they should let their child slide back into some of the more self-defeating habits. I would also add that it just becomes apparent for me, especially like into middle school, where I become more self-conscious, and some forms of help, while good for helping me like overcome certain ways of thinking or certain symptoms that might not be very helpful, tend to sometimes be done in a way that's very obvious, where people would see a counselor coming into the classroom saying, "Oh, can I pull you aside for a minute?" And I didn't really appreciate that, because I felt like people would judge me, and I'm pretty sure at that age people do judge, even though they shouldn't judge.
I hear that a lot. My clients
Really
are very
true.
sensitive to standing out, to
Well
being
said,
singled
Nicholas.
out.
Well said.
Right? So we have to be very sensitive about
Well, you got
how we
the
do
one
those
right,
things.
Nick.
Yeah. That's a very important factor. And we have to be as subtle and as discreet as possible so that everyone's comfortable with the process, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And especially, and like, this isn't coming from a completely, like I myself was very judgmental back then, so I'm conscious that other people are being judgmental. I think it's just a time in our life, middle school, where just everyone is, people are not very nice people in middle school, I think, regardless of whether autism is involved or not involved. So that's a particularly difficult time.
Did you have aides in middle school, or just counseling support? Like, I'm sorry, like therapists coming in and checking in on you.
It got less frequent over time. I was part of this, I think, program called Learning Strategies, and they wanted to continue into high school actually, but I told them no. I mean, I'm not going to have it because, based on two things. First, I think first of all, like again, it's a self-consciousness. I don't want to stand out. I don't want people to think that I'm like one of the weird kids. I think the second issue is that I think a lot of people at a certain age think to themselves, wow, like 3 years ago, I wish I wasn't myself 3 years ago. I wouldn't be friends with myself 3 years ago. And that's how I was thinking like in 8th grade or 9th grade as well.
That's rough.
Oh, I've improved so much. I don't think I need to smoke anymore. Like I'm getting pretty decent grades at this point, without realizing that there are other aspects about autism and learning difficulties in general that can still be improved to a large degree, and that perhaps this program would have continued to help me. At the end of the day, I don't necessarily regret my decision. I think ultimately the benefit of not standing out outweighed the cost of maybe having to work a little harder on my own and have a few more failures before like learning how to do things the right way.
Oh, that's very helpful. Thank you. That's great. All right, Michael, I'm going to turn back to you. Okay, here's the question. What do you do when you feel stressed or overwhelmed?
Oh, it's simple. If I'm at home with my family and therapists who have known me forever, I would may raise my voice, sometimes like a yell, ranting, swear, or argue. You name it. Sorry. At home, I would go to my room and listen to my music, watch a funny video, or go on my computer. Plus, I don't like anyone else. Oh, sorry. Plus, I don't like anyone else yelling at me because it causes me a whole lot of stress. I would never do this in a public place. Besides, in public, I might pace a little, speak Chinese under my breath, to help. I would text my parents or my therapist, but let's say, for example, Janet, for example, who have supported me since I was very young. And I feel safe with them. She let me vent and she doesn't judge me and help me to calm down at all. Plus, well, I also still flick my hand by my face and do what my mom calls the rain dance, but only in my bedroom, but not in public. Nope, never ever. I still pace back and forth, but I would only do this at home.
All right, very helpful. Thank you. Nick, I guess I want to go back to what you were talking about your middle school experience. Is there anything that you think providers today could provide to ease people's journey through middle school? It is such a difficult. I mean, you couldn't pay me enough. I would not go back to middle school. Like, it's such a difficult experience. And then to be someone, who has, who's working on their social skills, and then, like, what is something that you think, if you have an idea that you wished could have been provided at that time, whether it was like a social skills group or something that you think might have been beneficial?
Like personally, I might regret saying this, but I'd be pretty curious to go back to middle school and see if I could survive one more time. But I might eat my words once that actually comes into practice. I think that a lot of, wait, sorry, just to clarify, do you mean like educators to autistic children in particular, or like educators to like the school as a whole to teach them like to understand more about, what autistic kids go through and everything?
Well, I guess that kind of answers both, because I mean, certainly if we would institute more programming that was like overall compassion, and I think some schools are moving towards educating people on mental health and onto conditions that you can't see. Like, just because you can't see I'm in pain doesn't mean it's not happening. Just because you can't see my difficulty doesn't mean I don't have one. And I've certainly seen more movements in that in the communities that I'm in. But so I think that's a great thing to bring up. You're right. So like global education to improve everyone's compassion and empathy and mental health awareness, but then also anything individually that could have helped you.
Yeah, I think first of all, they need to destigmatize things like, seeking psychological help and everything. And this is both for people with autism as well as anybody else who's not mentally 100% healthy. And I think also they need to preempt certain things, in the sense that there were episodes in middle school where I would like sit down at a table and then everyone else would like get up and leave, right? And then afterwards in the classroom, the teacher would try to be subtle about it, and and ask the whole class, you should make sure you're inclusive, and like if you feel bad about it, like stand up to the bullies and everything. Okay, everyone knew that they were talking about me, right? So I think at that point, like before such things happen, teachers and educators should try to like not tell people, but mold people into being more decent, inclusive individuals. I think that applies in terms of like just not just like classes specifically focused on the individual morality, but also the way we teach history and like social sciences, for example. I think there's a big movement for that in other contexts when we're talking about like race or gender and that kind of thing, which I think is all very good. And mental health and and certain disabilities can also be included in that kind of curricula. In terms of me myself, I think the destigmatization thing applied to me in particular. I definitely had this kind of fear of looking like I'm weak if I saw extra help and that kind of thing. And I know I talked a lot about other people's perception, but like for me especially, like I thought I'd grown out of so many things, and I did, and I thought that seeking outside help would confirm to myself that I had not actually grown out of these things. So I think destigmatization is very important. I think that also there are ways of helping someone like me understand that that it's not an issue of acting completely within the bounds of societal expectations, and also just completely subverting all the rules either. There's always an in-between where you can kind of ease people into any of your personality quirks, into your way of thinking and things like that. And also I think that's very helpful to encourage people with autism to observe other people, and to not only pick up good behaviors, but also maybe try not to adopt behaviors like bullying, which was unfortunately my takeaway at times.
Right, really identifying what we want to emulate, what we might not want to emulate, but being good observers of others. That's very helpful. Thank you. All right, back to Michael. So Michael, I'm going to ask you, right. Your book, you have such a positive attitude. It's very infectious. Where does your positive attitude in life come from?
It came from my parents. My mom always telling me to be a lot positive. It's true. I am a positive guy with an attitude. Like, say, for example, when I first started writing this book, I got nervous and thought, no one's going to buy my book. People are going to think, who the hell is Michael Tensor? Or what the hell is Michael Tensor? Or that, right? My parents and therapists did help me to stay positive and write this book for me. It's true. On the other hand, my whole extended family, let's say aunts, uncles, grandparents, and cousins, have always accepted me as Michael and always to this day support me, and how proud they are of me. And always still growing up, my older brother included me into his group of friends. My parents always tell me it's not my fault, but you have to adjust to how you deal with it. Simple.
I think that's very helpful. I think a lot of people get it. A lot of encouragement through those words. Thank you. Let me turn back to Nick. Let's see. And I'm not sure if you feel like this affects you today, but do you feel like your diagnosis affects you? And are there helpful, unhelpful ways? Like in some ways, like when I work with a client and they have a special interest, if they have a special interest that can be moved into a career or a very satisfying hobby, we'll want to help them develop that. So in that way, there's an element of their autism that actually boosts them in their success and moving forward. But there may be unhelpful things that come up as well. Do you feel like it affects you today in any helpful or unhelpful ways?
Yeah. And here again is where the self-justification comes in. This was, I think this was especially prevalent in like the first years of undergraduate college and in high school, where like general education requirements were a big part of the curriculum. I knew what I was going to like. I knew what I wanted to do as at least focus on as a potential area of interest, like history, like social sciences, that kind of thing, which made me absolutely detest doing anything related to STEM.
I've heard this a lot.
Animal Planet was okay. I enjoyed Animal Planet. I still like watching random videos of like hippos like eating other animals, not eating, but like just being very violent towards other animals. I just think it's kind of fascinating and a little gruesome. But in terms of like the actual academic aspect of studying for science tests and math tests, I could not bring myself to do that. I still couldn't bring myself to do it even if I had to. I think the last time I had to deal with that was when I was taking the GRE exam for grad school, and I had to force myself. I basically had to make a conscious decision to put off studying math until like maybe 3 nights before. I wasn't expecting to get a high score, or even an average score by any means, but I think perhaps doing it 3 nights before forced me to get the adrenaline up, get my desperation level up, so I'd really focus. And so there are like all sorts of, I guess, workarounds that with varying degrees of helpfulness. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of autistic people, myself definitely, had to. It would be good for us to develop some more self-discipline when it comes to doing the necessary things in order to succeed in whatever like our primary focus career aspirations are.
Excellent. Thank you. That was great. All right, Michael, I'm turning back to you. What do you think is a common misconception of autism spectrum disorder?
When I was a lot young and not speaking at the same time and not going to school, other parents would ask my mom, if I was violent, did I bite or would I hurt someone? Well, we are all unique and different. I was never violent or did I bite? But we have anxiety on a very extreme level, like smell, noise, and touch. We have no control until we taught how to deal with all these. We do want friends. We do have and show lots of different emotions. We just want to be accepted by the whole world. And I want to be accepted too.
Yeah, very well put. That's great. Do you, Nick, what do you think is a common misconception of ASD that you've come across?
I think it's been mentioned before already, but I think that by far the biggest misconception is the idea that we're not self-conscious and don't want to make friends and that kind of thing. Um, I think also something that I might have alluded to so far is that just because you grow out of certain symptoms, it doesn't mean it's still like experience still affects you. Doesn't mean the experience doesn't affect you in negative ways either. In terms of like what the misconception that I think has the most tangible effect when it comes to like not necessarily helping autistic kids most efficiently, I think it's definitely the idea of you know, I guess I already answered this question earlier, so now I'm trying to think of a new original thing to say besides the self-consciousness. Perhaps it's the idea that we have maybe that we're not capable of making good conversation. I think is one of them actually. I think a lot of it comes from the fact that we are very nervous with ourselves, that as used to as much rejection as we face, we never really become used to it, because every new rejection, whatever we're talking, especially when we're talking about friends in this context, is like or like people saying they don't want to be your friend or hang out with you and that kind of thing. It's always something that hits you very hard, especially if you think you are making progress in therapy and adopting behaviors that are generally accepted in society. So I think a lot of it is that we're capable of making good conversations, just that we kind of lose our words sometimes, and that we need to be put into, I think, a safe space, a situation where we don't feel like, the implications of, tripping up is going to like really, really hurt us. Obviously, I think we eventually have to be thrust into difficult social situations, but I think it's best to, in a way, give people a preview of what it's like. My parents, for example, arranged play dates with me with other kids when I was like 5, 6, 7 years old, like in the time before people became too judgmental and before people were like really bully in earnest. And I think that was a good warm-up, good practice for knowing what I would have to do later on.
Right. I mean, it's really talking about that resiliency and how, I saw Michael kind of respond like you can be making progress, but you can be re-injured in those emotional places. So it's but sticking with it, and that resiliency is super important for all of us to appreciate and acknowledge and really try to support that in our individuals. That like keep going. You're doing fantastic. Of course, it's not going to be 100% every day. You're going to have maybe a 70% day. And you're doing awesome,
Very slow progress. Like at a certain, like there were a couple of years where I refused to eat anything that wasn't yellow or white or brown, and I would have died of malnutrition if my mom didn't sneak spinach into my brownies. Obviously, people sneak into the brownies these days, but
right. No, but I mean, when I, it's such a pleasure to talk to both of you, and I have the privilege of talking to people all the time. But now people get insight into the kind of conversations I get to have with people on the spectrum, and they're wonderful. It's fascinating, and it's such a unique perspective. So yeah, I get involved in the best conversations. Absolutely, you're right. That's a misconception that we need to. We're blowing it up right now. Okay.
At the same time, people for like not necessarily being the best conversationalists in every context if they're not.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'm gonna wrap up with one question for each of you. Michael, my final question for you is: what is something that you're looking forward to in the future?
Oh, that's a good question, actually, but I'm going to say this. I'm looking forward to having a book to help others understand this. Maybe do more interviews, and I'm feeling more comfortable than I was before. And I wouldn't mind meeting, the creators of South Park, Trey Parker and Matt Stone. I love South Park very much, like Joe Biden, J-pop singers like Yutaro Hikaru, Sekai no Owari, or End of the World, or BTS, for example. I always wanted a chance to write future episodes of South Park with them. I mean, it's my dream. And I wouldn't mind becoming more independent by looking after myself the best I can. And plus, thank you, people, we should get rid of labels like high and low functioning labels should be banned. For example, let's just refer as Michael instead. It's just autism is a part of you. It's not all of you. I'm just me. And cycle. Autism is the best.
Fantastic. Fantastic. All right. And Nick, for you, what advice would you give young people with autism and their parents?
I think they should be mindful that I think a lot of it is stuff that I've mentioned. Like you try to think more flexibly and not try to self-justify everything. Think about, I think, the general mental state of people when they are in difficult situations. Like for people with autism, people who might be bullied a lot because of whatever behaviors they might exhibit, is that I think of what the ideal situation could be, and then think about how to get there, and also understand perhaps that when you're being bullied, it's not necessarily that it's not necessarily that they're going to be malicious for the rest of their lives, right? I think people are just jerks when they're in middle school. I mean, I bully people in middle school, and I'm not a perfect person by any means. I like to think that I'm not the same person I was in middle school when it comes to how I dealt with people I thought I could dominate or bully or whatever. So
Bullying
I think
sucks.
it does suck, and
It is true.
Yeah. It is hard to think logically and justify that. Oh, it'll get better later when you're in the moment, right? It's easier said than done, of course.
But we need to provide as much encouragement as we can to get through those times, and the perspective of people like you who can say it doesn't last forever, and there's so many positive, wonderful things ahead. Let's keep moving forward, right?
Yeah, I think I think a lot of it as Michael mentioned earlier, even if you have autism, it's best not for any stakeholders involved not to be very reductionist about it, not to assume that they're all the same people with all the same needs and all the same desires, and that we're actually a very diverse group of people, and that there's obviously intersection with other things that might define you as well. I think that I think lumping autistic people into the same box is a very big disservice.
Absolutely, that was perfect, you guys. I'm so grateful you both came and were able to share your stories with us and to educate the audience about what it's like for just what it's like to be Nick and what it's like to be Michael. Thank you so much, and we really appreciate you answering all of these questions and being with us today.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Arigatou gozaimasu. Thank you.
So we've just concluded our panel for the conference, and I did want to say a few things about our participants today. We're definitely here today to celebrate the progress of individuals on the spectrum, no matter where that takes them. And when you're starting intervention with a child, especially early intervention, we can't always predict where our kids will go, but our mission is to give them high quality treatment so that they can reach their fullest capabilities. So this may take many years and lots of hours of dedication and support, and you can certainly see that reflected in our two participants today. The sacrifices and the efforts made by their families and the hard work that they put in. You can see them achieving their dreams and goals. And the path is going to look different for different individuals, but we have two great examples of people that are performing at a very high level and accomplishing things that maybe they wouldn't have thought they were able to do before. So this was a wonderful opportunity for families. One of the things I wanted to add is that at my agency, I run a parent connection group, and we come together, families raising kids on the spectrum, because other parents truly understand what that experience is like. It's hard to talk to people that don't have a child on the spectrum and have them completely understand where you're coming from with some of your concerns about the future or about their well-being or about the decision-making you're having to do with regard to treatment. I think when you're able to kind of get the voice of young adults as they progress, it helps to support families in that process. And one of the things that we do in my parent group is we always end with what's an accomplishment that you've achieved or what's something that we could celebrate for you? And in our group, sometimes it's, you know, my child said his first words today when he pointed at something and then looked at me when he did it, and the parents will applaud that. Another parent might add, my child won a geography bee and we never thought he'd be able to stand on stage and answer those questions. Another parent might say, you know, my child went to the store by themselves and purchased something. And we're able as a community to come together and celebrate all those milestones, no matter where the other children are at, because it's not a comparison. It's really about people meeting their goals and living the most productive lives they can and have the most opportunities possible. So with that, we're very grateful that we had our panelists today. I do want to, again, promote Michael's book. So this is Michael Tanzer's book, MICHAELISM, My POV on Life with Autism. You can find it on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And thank you all for watching, and we hope that this was beneficial to you.